Welcome to the Allen Americans podcast. Tommy Daniels here alongside the head coach of the Allen Americans, Steve Martinson. Marty, let's get right to it. And last week, the big announcement of Lamont and Lancaster returning. Those two guys have been inseparable and obviously a big signing for us.
Yeah, when we talk about it, they play the game right. They both have offensive skills. Obviously, Lancaster was leading the league in scoring when we loaned him the first time. And, I think he was a top 5 in scoring per game in the league, if not top 2 or 3. And then, Lamon's one of those guys that, he started out a little bit behind guys just because we were so deep and he was a rookie and he proved that he's just a really dependable, he's a penalty killer, block shots. He was those guys you put out in the last minute of a period and just those are glue guys. We've got, basically everybody that we mentioned so far that we announced were guys that we consider, character players in our organization.
And you talked about Lamon's second half of the year when he was so good. Is he one of those guys, Marty, this year that you could see if he gets off to a hot start that he gets some looks from the American Hockey League team?
Well, I mean, I certainly think he can play in the American League. It's just, when he gets the opportunity and where, but, because that's one of the things that they want. They want guys that are solid defensively, and they want guys that can skate. And, he's strong on pucks and wins battles. So, and he can play any position. He can, he's a centerman, but he's one of those guys that he'll play defense if you need him to.
And last, as you mentioned, got off to the great start last year. He played with 3 teams, scattered games in the American Hockey League last year. Could you see where he gets signed by one team this year and maybe gets that up and down look this year like a few of our guys did last season?
I mean, this whole, the environment is different in the American League. There's some teams that aren't signing. I mean, like Toronto's not signing anybody right now. They're waiting. And so I think there'll be a little bit of teams holding out and not signing as many depth players and coming after the free agents. So, I think he'll certainly get opportunity. And it's one of those things that, it's a really good signing, but it's a guy that you feel like, you're going to lose at times, but you hope he's here for the playoffs.
With Europe kind of up in the air, nobody knows for sure when things are going to start there, especially in different leagues. How has that affected guys that you've talked to, players, just free agents that are still looking or waiting for Europe? Is it changed anything from the normal year?
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. There's a lot of guys not going back, and there's guys that may sign and not be able to go. There might be a lot of players available later in the summertime. And that's why, I told guys to sign early and, let me know what you wanted to do. And, those guys, we had a bunch of those guys sign right away. Some guys are waiting, but, I can sign 4 or 5 players a day right now if I wanted to. I'm just waiting.
Could Alex Breton be one of those guys? Because I know he talked about it, during a couple interviews during the summer that, he was leaning that way. But how much has that changed now for a player like him?
Well, he's got a coach that he used to play with that's in Finland or something over there. He just told me the other day. So I'm not sure Alex is going to stay. I think if he feels like he was defenseman of the year and he can't get an American League deal, I think he'll probably look to go to Europe. And whether, the difference is it depends on where you're at in the food chain in Europe too, because some of the money teams, there's not as much money left. And so a lot of guys don't want to go over there if the money isn't worth it. So, and then you're running different risks when you go to Europe and when you can get back and you get locked in and healthcare and all that other stuff, so there's I wouldn't be going to Europe if I was that player, but, I guess they got to look at every situation different for each player.
So the NHL made the announcement this week that kind of their outline for when they're going to come back. And it looks like there would only be 6 weeks, Marty, after the end of the Stanley Cup Finals before they went to camp in November and got started in December. How do you think that would affect us going forward?
Well, it's 6 weeks for the teams that go to the finals. It's not 6 weeks for most of the other teams are well rested. So, I think those guys that go to the finals just have to suck it up a little bit. It isn't like they played 10 months. They've already had a big break. So I think that, I hear different things, whether, what exactly when we start. I mean, I think now that we could get American League players if we start before the American League, because, I really, they're on a yearly salary. So it would benefit NHL teams to send them earlier and get more reimbursement money for them. So all that kind of is up in the air, and it's tough for me to speculate. I just know we're going to start at some point, and I think everybody's crossing their fingers and hoping that from a health standpoint that there's some kind of vaccine or something come around before the end of the year. But it's kind of wait and see.
Amen to that. Last thing for you. 4th of July just passed. I know you always have a big, party at your place there in Illinois. Was it as normal as years past? Were you able to have a lot of people over, or was it reserved to just family?
Well, the kids had more people over than we probably wanted. Some other kids showed up later. We kept the group kind of small during the day. Just my daughter had friends in from Chicago and Texas, so she had 4 or 5 friends over, and so we really had about 10 people, and then. But everybody's outdoors the whole time. So we blew off a lot of fireworks. Our neighbors across the river, there's a lot of big houses over there. And I always joke that they have a competition to see who's got the best and the most. So without all the cities doing the fireworks, and we're only 8 miles south of Wisconsin. So there was a ton of fireworks going off in my neighborhood. And we had some friends up from Texas, and they couldn't believe how much fireworks were going off in the neighborhood. But it's kind of safer because they're blowing them up over the river. Just don't want that stuff landing on you.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, thanks again for doing this, and best of luck to you over the weekend. Enjoy your time there as we get ready for a big announcement again coming up next Tuesday. Americans head coach Steve Martinson